Okay, this is video 6 of module 3. This is the last video of my discussion of cartography. Last time I talked about color. Color is a very important consideration when you're making maps. You also need to consider the fact that not everyone can see colors properly. There's a limited window of the spectrum that people can see, and that's generally the RGB, red, green, blue layers or bandwidths of the spectrum. If you use qualitative measures, nominal or ordinal measures, you're going to make one type of color selections where colors are distinct from each other. If you use the quantitative measures like ordinal and interval and ratio, you're going to use a different scheme, and you can use, in that case, a diverging scheme or a sequential scheme. Okay, so there's many more map elements I can cover to talk about cartography. Remember, this is an entire semester or an entire career if you want to make it a career. These three down below I've already talked about: symbology, classification, and color. So I will walk quickly through some of these other considerations that you might have when you're making a map. Okay, one of the best ways to learn how to make maps is to look at maps and just on your own decide whether a map is a bad map or a good map. And so composition is something that you kind of get with time and with experience. You can gain that experience by looking at maps. So here's some examples of kind of bad map composition. This one on the left looks like it was annotated with someone's comments about what was going on with the map. Here, you shouldn't use a magnifying glass. That isn't really the way people think of zooming anymore. If there's an error, you should make it clear to the user. There's white space here, and so one of the things you think about with your map composition is you don't want to have too much or too little map space. You don't want the reader to think the map is too full or too empty. So that's one of the basic composition things you need to think about. Obviously, this map is way too busy. There's way too much stuff. There's no thematic content or navigational content that's apparent in this map, so I don't know what this map is about. Another way too busy map. There's too many things included in this map. The labels are too close in type size to each other. It's just too much stuff. It's kind of obvious when you see these maps that there's too much stuff. Here we have a map that has some major color issues, way more contrast than you should be using unless you're going to make this map presented to a young person. And it's hard to tell, even though this is a thematic map and it appears to be showing mineral resources for certain countries. The labels are sized improperly. You can't really tell what's going on. Bad map. This map is showing quantitative data. It's kind of hard to see, but it looks like this top one is population living below the poverty line. So those are numeric values. And remember, when you have quantitative values, you don't want to use distinct colors for values. In this case, does blue mean not very many people in poverty to you? Does red mean a lot of people in poverty? So when you have quantitative measures, you're generally going to use one sequential color, or if you have a bimodal distribution, you might use two and use a diverging color scheme. This one has a similar issue down below. It's numeric data and it's symbolized with colors that are distinct. This is one where things just aren't centered, and a user, a map reader, is generally their eyes are going to drift to the center of the map because that's generally where the most important stuff is. It seems that this might be what this map is supposed to be about. You would think that that piece should be in the center of the map. And this draws the user's attention away from the map itself over to the corner, so bad map. Okay, enough of that. Composition. One of the main things you need to think about in composition is what's called the figure-ground relationship. And that's basically what's important. That's the figure. Everything else should be in the background. So the important part of your map, the most important part of your map, should be something that sticks out, that stands out, that draws the reader's eyes to the thing you're trying to tell them. Here's an example of Bangladesh. So you can see that there appears to be a country border here. Some of the cities, capital city uses a different symbol. All good map practice. And then this is a surrounding area. And so if really what's most important on this map is Bangladesh, you can kind of emphasize the importance of Bangladesh by just making it a little bit different color, making contrast, bringing it out so the reader's eyes are drawn to that. when you have a thematic map, and remember a thematic map is a map that illustrates just one theme or one concept, make sure that you're clear about what that theme is, and make sure that you don't include a lot of additional information that confuses or draws the reader's attention away from that main theme that you're targeting. And if you want to target a portion of that theme, say the high end or the low end, use symbology that accentuates the piece of the theme that you want to target. Title, obvious title. There are some things that a title should include, like the basic components, what's this map about, where is it located, and also in many cases when was this map drawn or what time does it cover, because maps will change with time. I'll talk about type a little bit more in following on slides, but basically the title should have the largest type, because that's where the reader's eyes are going to go in terms of text. It'll go first to the largest type. And so if you want them to know the summary information about that map, draw them to the title with largest type. Okay, typography. General rule is larger type is more important than smaller type. There's always been debates about whether serifed fonts are preferred to sans serif fonts. In general, in reading blocks of text, serif is better and easier for the reader to understand than sans serif. But in maps, you don't have a lot of blocks of text, so you can use either one of these types of fonts, and you can actually mix fonts, but you have to be careful. Sometimes mixing fonts confuses people. Sometimes it makes a distinction that's important. So you need to think about what kind of fonts you use. Mixed case, better than either all lower or all uppercase, and traditionally italic fonts have been used for water features. Just like last video, I talked about the website called Color Brewer. There's a website called Type Brewer that's put out by a group at the University of Wisconsin. You can go out to that website and you can kind of look at what some of the choices you might make with components of typography are and how that impacts what the map might look like. So it's a good place to kind of practice how things impact a map. Okay, when you make a map, from Module 2 we learned about projections and we learned about developable surfaces and all that stuff, but what we learned mainly from that was that 2D maps distort 3D reality. So if you're going to provide a map for someone, you need to give them information about the projection so that they're going to know where distortion might be on the map. Also, if you want to make it easier for people to find just a part of a map or zoom into a location on the map, you should include a grid, which would be horizontal and vertical lines separated by the projected dimensions. A graticule is a grid, but it uses latitude and longitude instead of the linear dimensions that a grid do. Scale and generalization. Here's an example of this where I'm zoomed in quite a ways to a city, it appears. I have linear features that appear to be roads or streets, and they're different symbols, so they mean something. There's obviously a legend here. I have streets and I have houses in here, and so in this case I've got a lot of information, but I've generalized, probably, I think I can tell, that these are just points. They could be polygons if you wanted to use a house footprint, the shape of the house. So if we were to zoom in even more, we might want to use polygons for the houses instead of points for the houses. If we zoom out a level, now the purple box is this size as opposed to this size, you can see that the houses have disappeared. So you're generalizing the map, you're not including the houses anymore. You can see here we have contour lines and we have intermediate contours. In this map, the intermediate contours have disappeared. So this map has had to generalize so that it doesn't become too busy and draw the reader's attention away from the main features of the map. Zoom out a little bit further, what happens? We don't have nearly as many contours anymore. A lot of these contours, even the main ones, have disappeared. And not only have the houses have disappeared, but all of the smaller streets, the neighborhood streets, have disappeared. And so generalization has forced you to think about what you want to show and what's important. Zoom out even further, and now almost all the minor streets are gone. All but the biggest contours are gone, and even some of the linear features have disappeared. So think about what's important at each scale of the map. And if you're going to make an electronic map, you can actually make a map that displays different features at different levels of scale. Or a paper map, you're going to have to decide what features are most important at the scale in which that map will be published. Scale bars. You can see that you can do a lot of things with scale bars. ArcGIS will let you do a lot of fancy things with scale bars. It's kind of a personal preference. I'm not really a fan of these busy scale bars that have a lot of colors and a lot of distinctions in them. I like the more simple scale bars, but some people like more complicated and more showy scale bars. These are going to work well when you have a paper map and you're going to either zoom in or zoom out by blowing up that paper map, because the scale bar will zoom in or zoom out. You can also represent scale as a fraction, 1 to 24,000. 1 unit on the map is equal to 24,000 units on the Earth, or as a ratio again, or as an equivalent unit. 1 inch on the map is 2,000 feet on the surface of the Earth. These are all ways that you can understand things in a printed map, but if you were to give someone a scale of 1 inch equals 2,000 feet on a map that might get enlarged, then 1 inch is not going to be 2,000 feet. So this scale won't work if you're going to have a chance of enlarging or reducing the map. Legend. Legends are the kind of thing that you need to include so that the map reader can look at the legend and quickly determine what the distinctions between colors are. And for a thematic map, that's going to be important because you're going to have some type of a color scheme that shows distinctions between the features that you're showing. This is a standard set of symbols that are in a standard legend for USGS hydrography maps. And so this legend tells you what all of the symbols mean clearly and concisely. People who are used to the USGS maps know about standard symbols, and they'll be able to look at the map and they'll know the standard symbols. If you're not used to USGS maps, you might want to use this legend and might look on the map and say, what the heck is this dashed line? And look on the legend, you're going to get an explanation for what it is. Never include features symbolized on your map that you don't have in your legend, because sometimes there are people that aren't going to understand what that feature might be without a legend entry. Here's an example of an awfully showy, I guess I would say, legend, and this one appears to be depicting partisan performance. So the legend has a title that actually interprets what these numbers might be or these colors might be. You notice this is a diverging color scheme, so it goes from one color at the edge to another at the other edge with a neutral color, in this case white, in the middle. And notice also that red, which is usually associated with Republicans, and blue, which is associated with Democrats, are colored appropriately. And this is that historic and cultural reference. If colors mean something historically or culturally to people, you should use consistent colors. To me, this is a little bit showy with these fancy things that there are over at the corner and these symbol blocks which aren't just rectangles, but some people are going to like that better than other people. So it's up to you. You're making the map. You're sending the message. North arrow. There have been, if you can believe it, cartographers get into debates about whether north arrows should be included in maps. And in general, most people think of up as north on a map. But in many cases, to get the orientation of what you're trying to show to fit in the presentation format of your map, let's say it's 8.5 by 11 landscape, if you have something that's oriented in a way that in order to have it look proper in terms of composition, north is not up, you're going to need to include a north arrow. So here's an example of an upside down map where maybe somebody from Australia might think of up as towards the South Pole instead of the North Pole. And so without a north arrow on this map, someone might become very confused. Here you see this is a south arrow. And you can get showy or not less showy. Choose all kinds of different arrows. ArcGIS will let you mess with that. Personal preference. Again, try not to distract the user from the message you're trying to send. Metadata, I'll talk more about this in the next module. Basically, it's information about the data that you're presenting in the map. 5 whys, who, what, when, where, and why, plus how, ideally is in metadata. But you don't want to include all that information on a map in most cases. So minimally, you should include the data source. Where did you get the data? In case people want to go get the data for themselves and explore the data. And what the contact info is for the person who made the map or someone who knows how the map was constructed, so that if you don't understand or you need more information, you'll be able to contact someone. Also, if something has been done to the data source to make the map look the way it has, it's always a good idea to say, I did something to the data to make it look the way it looks. Okay, that was a quick fly through of map elements and cartographic language. Next week I'm going to talk about metadata, the 5 W's and an H, who, what, when, where, why, and how. Data standards, the standards that you use so that you'll know that the data that you get has a certain level of accuracy and precision and things like that. And data quality, how you can evaluate the quality of data in terms of how much error there might be in the data. So that'll be the next module, Module 4, and I'll see you next week.